Letter from Sid Brown, Phil's cousin, dated March 31st. Dear Phil, your letter of March 1st came while I was on my furlough, and having returned only yesterday, I'm wasting no time in answering your most welcome letter. You sending me Ev's letter confused me until I read what it was all about. Thanks a million for it. Yale certainly had a serious illness. I hope no after effects are left. Shirley will make him a good wife from what I gathered in her letter to me. Married life must be swell. I wish I could get it in my head. Every once in a while, I make up my mind to marry, and then I say, to whom? And then again, I say, who in the hell wants to marry? When I get out of this army, I want to be free. If I feel about civilian life like I did on my furlough, near the ending of it, well, I'm going to have a tough time on the outside. I had a marvelous time, but all the while, page 2, something inside me was lacking. I did things that I'd be ashamed to do in the States, but still, as I said, something was missing. Then I started to get bored, and all I wanted to do was to go back to camp. Then we had to be AWOL for 2 days because of priorities on the planes. We reported in to the main signal office in Cairo, and that stopped me from getting the bust. I was really worried about that. I waited a long time to get where I'm at, and I'll be damned if I want to lose it. I had a swell time in Cairo and Alexandria. I saw the Sphinx and pyramids and the old Cairo. Went to shows, nightclubs, and a few places where girls are plentiful. Wow. No kidding, as Abbott and Costello team says, I'm a bad boy. After not seeing a white woman for close to 4 months, a lot of things happen to you. Of course, this is to be silent, you know. You can tell Ev, but don't tell my brothers, as it will get to the folks. As I mentioned before, I better settle down when I get, page 3, back to the States, or I'll be lost and find myself right back in the army. It is a life that grows on you. I find I'm much more at ease and sleep better while at camp than on the outside. Well, enough of me. Congratulations on Adele Barra. I wrote to you after that Christmas greeting, but it must have gone by the way. Glad to see that you are doing okay and get home once in a while. I hope that you are in good shape once again. I'm tip-top and tip the scales between 160 to 165 pounds. We are all wondering where we shall go after this Middle East affair is over. Home or to another theater. Lot of rumors going around. We got our Middle East campaign ribbon last week. I hope I'm the only one of our family who ever has to wear ribbons. Good luck. All my love, Sid. P.S. I was 25, March 23rd. I always said I was going to marry at that age. I think I'll marry one of those wags here, page 4, to keep that promise. A nice black one that doesn't wear rays is preferable, huh? Oh, you don't know just what it will mean to me just to talk and neck once more with an American girl. They're tops, A1, the best in the world. I sound crazy, but I'm not kidding. We all feel that way. What a lot of wolves will someday be released in the States, and there will be a lot of she-wolves to grab us up. What a day, and what a life. Phooey. Philip to Anna Paller, Evelyn's mother. April 8, 1943. Dear Mom, for the first time since I was home, an opportunity has presented itself for me to get a letter off to you. Not being aware of the demands my work makes on my time, you doubtless feel that I am at fault for not writing sooner and oftener. The fact is, I am kept very busy from 6 a.m. until 5 p.m. at the office. Then begins a mad rush to get washed, shaved, and cleaned up generally so that I can get into town as early as possible because I know that Evelyn will be hungry and waiting at the bus station. We finish supper about 8 o'clock and wind up at the house about 9, at which time we must start preparing for bed if I'm to get up at 5 a.m. So you see, Mom, that it was little short of impossible for me to write. Don't condemn Evelyn's failure to write more often either, because while she had a little more time during the day to attend it, she never knew until I showed up in the evening what was what, and consequently didn't know what to write. The captain had threatened to restrict us all to camp because a few of the fellows got in trouble, and I didn't know from one day to the next whether or not I could get a pass. Luckily, the captain was good enough to allow the married men who have their wives living in Columbus to leave the camp, although the rest of the company has been restricted to the base for the last 2 weeks, and everything worked out fine after all. But we spent a few anxious days wondering whether or not I could get a pass the following day, and Evelyn was too distraught to take any interest in letter writing. Too, she didn't know exactly what to write since everything was so uncertain. I realized that all the foregoing is no real excuse for Evelyn's failure to write, and I called her down for her, page 2, lack of consideration. But I did want to point out that she is not as much at fault at first glance would indicate. Please, Mom, don't think too badly of us on this account, although you are amply justified in feeling hurt. I forgot to mention that my little accident of Monday contributed very little to Ev's peace of mind. It didn't help me either. We were going over the obstacle course in lieu of morning calisthenics when, on attempting to jump across a ditch, I just barely managed to land on my toes on the far side. The full weight of my body was suddenly projected onto my toes and ankles, and it was too much for them. I managed to limp from the field and go to work, but the pain, dull at first, increased as the morning wore on, until finally, at noon, it became so sharp that the few steps from the office to the dispensary were sheer torture. The medical officer looked at it and ordered me to hospital for X-ray. By this time, the pain was terrific, and I couldn't even walk outside to the ambulance, whereupon I got my first, and I hope my last, ride in a stretcher. The X-ray showed nothing more serious than a badly sprained ankle, so the medics brought me back to the dispensary, where the officer taped my ankle up just like he would wrap a mummy. The foot was still very sore that afternoon, so I asked Evelyn to come to the base, as I was walking only with the greatest difficulty and didn't think I could make it to town. When she showed up at the base, however, I knew I couldn't send her back to town by herself. If you knew what having Evie here means to me, you could understand how I hated to send her back alone. So, although I could barely hobble, I went back with her. When I awoke next morning, most of the pain was gone, but I still had trouble walking because my ankle was stiff and didn't allow of much movement. Yesterday and today, though, found the foot getting much better, until at this moment I walk almost normally and there is no pain whatever. I'll keep the tapes on another week or so just for safety's sake. Saturday night I was lucky enough to get a weekend pass so that I could be with Evelyn that evening and all day Sunday. Sunday was a perfect day, and we took a long, page 3, I assume the left out word is walk, to the Topolovskys. He is the man I met at the synagogue about 4 months ago when I went there to give Adele a name. Although he and his wife only saw me for a few hours and haven't seen me since, they remembered me well, much to my surprise. Evelyn was at her very pretty best that night and made a very favorable impression. So I wasn't surprised when Mr. and Mrs. Bemis, the old man's daughter and son-in-law, urged her to stay at their place. Of course, we had already paid for our room in advance until Thursday, so we had to decline the kind invitation. Yesterday, Evelyn met me at the bus station, bag and baggage, fully intending to take the 8:50 train to Philadelphia. She had just become sick that morning and looked and acted tired. So much so that I hated the thought of subjecting her to the 12-hour train ride. Instinctively, I sought ways and means of keeping her here a few more days until she would be fit to travel. She had already given up the room, and since we couldn't afford to pay more rent, I had almost given up the idea. Then I remembered Mrs. Bemis's invitation and suggested to Ev that she call her and ask if she could stay there till Sunday. I forgot to mention that we had supper at the Bemis's Tuesday. Mr. Bemis is an insurance agent, and when Evelyn asked him about a policy for Adele at the Topolovsky Sunday, he told us to come to his home Tuesday, and he would give us the figures. Early Tuesday, Mrs. Bemis called Ev and told her to come for supper. After a swell supper of veal cutlets, my favorite, we sat down to talk business. Mr. Bemis' company, by an odd coincidence, is the Penn Mutual of Philadelphia, one of the oldest and finest in the country. The policy they offer sounds very good to me, and we wound up taking a form on which to apply for the insurance. The baby's doctor has to fill out an attached form before we can send it in. Anyway, what I wanted to point out was that the Bemises have been more than good to us, and I felt their invitation for Ev to stay with them for a few days was sincere, else I wouldn't have considered it in the first place. At first, Evelyn wouldn't hear of it. Page 4. And only after I pointed out that she was in no condition to travel, and after promising to call you to get your permission to stay, did she consent to call Mrs. Bemis. She, of course, told her she was entirely welcome, as I expected, and when Evelyn offered to pay, she wouldn't hear of it. Then we put in a call to MIC 8207, but the line was busy. The long-distance operator said she would call us back, so we waited and waited and waited. Finally, our patience exhausted, we called Davenport 2612, hoping you would be there. But my mother answered the phone, and we told her our intentions. When Evie heard with her own ears that Adele is okay, except for her crankiness due to teething, she was reassured and felt much better about staying a few more days. The Bemises have a nice new home, clean as a pin, and I, for one, am tickled about the whole thing. She gave us a whole room to ourselves with a big new double bed, for which Evie was especially thankful last night, because her menstruation was uncommonly painful. She had cramps most of the evening. The redeeming feature about the whole business was that I don't feel obligated to them at all, since Mr. Bemis will get a nice commission from the policy, and one good turn deserves another. Of course, I'm considering all this from a purely selfish angle, and you are no doubt wondering if we haven't forgotten your side of it entirely. I assure you, Mom, we don't for a minute forget how much work we have burdened you with, and we don't feel altogether comfortable about it. But we trust you understand and sympathize with us in our present circumstances. I know you want someone to do as much for you were you in our shoes, and I know too that you would be eternally grateful as we are for the favor. As for my keeping Evie here a few more days than we intended, I'm sure had you seen her last night, and all things considered, you would not have had me do otherwise. You may not understand where I found the time to type so lengthy a letter. Permit me to enlighten you. I am CQ today, which means that I have the office all to myself until tomorrow morning. I'm sorry I couldn't see F tonight because of it, but I'm glad for the opportunity it afforded me to. Page 5. Write to you and Mom. I called Evie this afternoon and she was feeling much better. The Bemis's are taking a ride somewhere this afternoon and taking Ev along. I wish I could be with her, but there's still Friday and Saturday nights and more than likely all day Sunday. We were pleased to hear that Jack is at nearby Camp Lee and hope he stays there as long as he must serve in the Army. We hope too that neither Harry nor Eddie will have to go just yet. And now I'm pretty tired and want to get to bed, so I'll sign off with love for all and a big kiss for Adele Barra from her mommy and daddy. Yours lovingly, Phil.